In 1988, Julie Ward embarked on a trip to Africa. He was passionate about his dream of wildlife photography. However, towards the end of his journey, he mysteriously disappeared. Julie's inexplicable disappearance sparked a 35-year search for his father, John Ward. What the hell happened to Julie? Whether he fell victim to wild animals, or was he murdered? Julian Ward was born on April 20, 1960 in Suffolkshire, England. He lives with his two younger brothers, Tim and Bob, and his parents, John and Jane Ward. His father, John Ward, was a successful businessman in the hospitality industry, owning a chain of hotels that allowed their family to live comfortably in the UK. Julie is a beautiful, intelligent and kind girl. He loves animals and has a passion for photography. It was this interest that led him to take a year off from his job as an assistant at a publishing house in Suffolk, England, to pursue his dreams. On February 7, 1988, 28-year-old Julie left the UK with 26 other travelers on a 7-month trip to Kenya to photograph wildlife. He hopes to be able to catch the wildebeest migration at the end of the trip. During your stay in Nairobi, Julie meets an older couple, Paul and Nakasha Wild Dixon. The couple owned a huge estate. Their grounds are often rented to travelers as campgrounds. They love Julie because he loves wildlife as much as they do, and allow Julie to spend most of July camping on their grounds. Later in August, Julie rented a cottage from the couple's neighbors. September 2, 1988. Julie and her friend Gun Burns drove the second-hand Jeep he bought in Nairobi to the Masai Mara. They planned to see the annual migration of wildebeest in a national park in neighboring Tanzania. They pitched their tents at the Thunder River campground. The next day, while the two were driving through the park, the car broke down near the Mara Serena Lodge. A tourist truck driven by a man named Stephen Watson towed them to the Mara Serena Inn. They stayed in a hotel for one day and hoped to return to Nairobi the next day. However, they soon discovered that their Jeep could not be repaired because the fuel pump had a problem and needed to be replaced. But Glenn had to attend a meeting at the Nairobi Museum the next day. He flew to Selededis the next day, leaving Julie alone. However, Glenn took the fuel pump in question and promised to send a replacement. He sent a replacement fuel pump on September 5, but due to the late delivery, Julie spent an extra night at the Mara Serena Lodge. Around noon on September 6, Julie leaves Savina Lodge and heads to Sandy River Campground. He was going to go there and retrieve the two tents that he and Glenn had left there 3 days ago. After getting his gear, he planned to sail to the Kikarak Hotel in Nairobi. Police officer Jael Karoli said he helped Julie tear down the tent and witnessed him drive away alone at 2:30 p.m. This was the last time Julie Ward was witnessed. Julie has booked a flight to the UK on September 10 and plans to spend some time with the Wilder Dixons before leaving. When Julie didn't show up on the 6th and 7th, they began to worry and contacted the local hospital and police department to worry that Julie might have had an accident. And when he didn't show up to take the throne in October, the Wilder Dixons reported Julie's disappearance and informed Julie's father, John Ward. John then arrived in Kenya by plane on September 12. At this time, Julie had been missing for 6 days. John organized a search at his own expense with the help of Wild, the Dixons, and a few friends Julie had made while in Kenya. They used 5 planes to search the vast Masai Mara reserve for any signs of Julie. The search paid off. On September 13, Julie's Jeep was found in a ravine in a creek called Magin, in the Marseille region, but no trace of Julie was found. The police immediately rushed to the scene to investigate. Among the items found inside the car were a map, 2 bottles of beer, a pair of binoculars, and a number of personal items. John thought the car was parked in a strange place because he was off the road and seemed to be heading in the direction of the river. However, in the dust on the roof of the Jeep, an SOS sign was found, and he was hopeful that maybe Julie's car would break down again, so he decided to walk forward. Later in the same day, Simon, the administrator, found a suspicious burnt bonfire near the Oranmutic Gate, and human remains were found in the ashes. John rushed to the scene. In the ashes, he found a left leg, jaw, spine, and a lock of hair. A month later, the skull was found in a nearby bush. Other body parts appear to have been burned to ashes. The evidence collected is strange and there are no signs of any fights or bloodstains. There is also a faint smell of gasoline. The first autopsy was conducted by the Kenyan police forensic doctor who confirmed the remains as Julie Ward. In the report, the medical examiner pointed out that he had also been cut with a sharp weapon and that there must have been traces of an attempt to burn it. For him, it was a murder case. However, an official police investigation into Julie's death presents contradictory claims. Although the medical examiner unequivocally determined that Julie's death was a murder case, saying that her leg was cleanly cut and soaked in gasoline and then set on fire, the police disputed this conclusion. Instead, they came up with a theory that Julie could have been struck by lightning and then bitten by a wild animal. When John Ward finally saw a copy of the autopsy report, he found that the report had been redacted, some words had been crossed out, or some had been typed. For example, forensic cuts on the legs and jaws have been changed to tear and crack. It was found out later. The autopsy results were tampered with by Jasenka, a consultant in Kenya. Although the medical examiner was not satisfied, because Jasenka was his boss, he had nothing to say. John then brought Julie's remains back to England, where Professor Austin in England performed a second autopsy that confirmed the forensic findings. Mukiri, the investigating police officer in charge of the case, believes that Julie may have committed suicide, further suggesting that Julie was too magnified. Kenyan investigators are reluctant to call the death a murder and refuse to investigate. John Ward accused Kenya of trying to cover up a murder case to protect the country's tourism industry. John decided to start his own investigation. Over the years, he traveled to Kenya several times in a desperate search for the truth. In the face of contradictions in the autopsy report, a trial was held in Balobi about the casualties of Julie Ward. During the interrogation, when he was asked about the revisions to the report on Julie Ward's death, Jason Card accused the medical examiner of having limited English skills and argued that he had revised the report for accuracy. However, at the same hearing, Jacinta further admitted that in the past hundreds of autopsy reports, this was the first time he had revised the report because of issues with the forensic English proficiency. The hearing also heard Austin's second autopsy, which resulted in him confirming the findings of the first autopsy by the forensic doctor, saying that the wounds on Julie's jaw and skull indicated that he was decapitated from behind with a sharp blade. In the end, the judge came to a conclusion. Julie was murdered by one or more unknown persons. However, he ordered no further investigation. In February 1990, at the urging of John Ward, the British Foreign Secretary authorized the Scottish factory investigators to conduct an investigation, and then they traveled to Kenya to investigate the case of Julie Ward. The initial investigation concluded that two civil service rangers, Peter and John Magaloy, were responsible for the case. Both rangers were at the Masai Mara Reserve that day to connect them to the site. However, during the trial, there was confusion about the testimony of Clerk David Nchoko and Police Officer Jalal Karali. They were the last two people to see Julie on her way out of the Sand River campground to Nairobi, and the Scotland Yard investigators were able to prove that Julie's signature was forged. Initially, David insisted that Julie Ward signed herself and left Marat. After the calligraphy expert confirmed that it was not Julie Ward's handwriting, David admitted that he had actually typed Julie Ward's message when he was away and was impersonating the signature, not because he wanted to create the impression that Julie Ward had left Marat. Rather, it was because he forgot to sign Julie when he left and that he had already left the handwriting that he was forced to sign on his behalf to avoid possible disciplinary action. Although police claimed to have seen Julie leave the campsite alone, in 2004, 16 years after Julie's death, an unnamed witness told investigators that they had witnessed an armed man in military uniform sitting in Julie's car. Nevertheless, these four men, two park rangers, clerks and police officers, were acquitted for lack of evidence, and 6 years later, in 1998, the preserve's chief ranger, Makara, became a suspect because he didn't order any of his 113 rangers to search for Julie when she disappeared. On the day Julie's jeep was found at 11 a.m., Makara was immediately notified. However, he did not immediately go to direct the search on the ground. Instead, drive in the opposite direction to the Serena Lodge. It wasn't until noon in the afternoon that he finally arrived at the scene. Police removed Julie's personal belongings from the vehicle before towing it and transported them to the Thunder River Police Department for safekeeping. The items that were removed included a map, a pair of sneakers, 2 bottles of beer, binoculars, and a few other items such as a tent and a sleeping bag. When Makara finally arrived at 3 p.m., there was no one on the vehicle. However, during the trial of the 2 park rangers, Makara told the judge that after he arrived at the scene, he peeked into the car and claimed that he saw a map, a pair of sneakers, 2 bottles of beer and a pair of binoculars. The items were taken by the police 3 hours before he arrived. Therefore, investigators put him on the list of suspects. In addition, Makara sent a radio report at 4:26 p.m. Claims that he found Julie's remains. In fact, Makara left the ditch at 4 p.m. where Julie's jeep was found. it took him only 26 minutes to cover the 10-kilometer distance, heading southeast to reach a desolate corner of the Masai Mara. Although the police retraced Makara's whereabouts, they found that the fastest way to get from Guk to Judy's relict sea was exactly 26 minutes. A few days after Julie's remains were found, Vakra disappeared from his post. At first officials said he was on leave, but then it turned out that he was suspended and the investigation of the case had hit a dead end. Some people think Julie may have been involved in illegal activities and was killed. It is also suggested that he may have worked for British intelligence by taking photographs of the military training camp in the Masai Mara, which could have led to his murder in the desert. In 1997, the Kenya Criminal Investigation Service appointed a new investigative team to review Julian's evidence that Ouattara was accused of murdering Julian. It is clear that Ouattara not only deceived people, but also lied about the whereabouts of the remains and the murders. Despite this, due to insufficient evidence, he was eventually acquitted. In 2012, John Ward published a report in the Nairobi Legal Monthly claiming that Jonathan Moy had killed Julie. He details all the evidence he has collected over the years. He revealed in his report that in 2009 he was approached by hidden Sheriff Machiri to talk to him about Julie's murder. Machiri claimed that after interviewing some people he suspected that Jonathan Moy had killed Julie. However, when he shared this information with his superiors, he was told to look elsewhere for a card. Machiri also claimed that Makara was not involved in the killing. Instead, he was told to dispose of the body. Machiri said he wanted to see John again and give him more evidence, but John never heard from him again. Later he heard that Machiri had died. In the report, he also talked about an informant who had been in touch with Jonathan Moy, shared details and showed a photo of himself with Jonathan. The informant claimed that on September 6, 1988, Jonathan, along with his farm manager, bodyguards and driver, met Julie along the route of the Masai Mara. A conversation that became heated led to Julie being killed by Jonathan's bodyguards. The name and location of the bodyguard, the driver and the farm manager were revealed, and he also mentioned that the farm manager, Ibrahim, was the son-in-law of President Moi and a close friend of Jonathan. It is said that as a result of the events in the Masai Mara, Ibrahim became estranged from Jonathan. During an argument between the two, Ibrahim lashed out at Jonathan for one day because of what you did with the girl across the road from Mara. I'm going to make you famous all over the world. 1999 Ibrahim is killed in a car accident. When John Ward meets Ibrahim's father, his father claimed that Ibrahim did not die in a car accident but was murdered. He said the autopsy report showed that Ibrahim had traces of rope on his wrist and obvious bruises on his body, indicating severe blunt trauma. Doctors suspect that Ibrahim was likely hung and beaten and died with severe damage to his spleen. He recalled the details of an eyewitness who saw a log across the road that caused Ibrahim's car to veer off the road and crash. Witnesses saw Ibrahim pull a briefcase out of his car and then be attacked by three men wearing turbans, and at first he thought it was a robbery. Although the authorities condemned Ibrahim's death to death, his father believed that his son had been murdered. He thought Ibrahim was going to reveal about his murder of Jolie and was killed by Jonathan. John also reported. In 2004, a former Kenyan intelligence officer revealed in an anonymous interview that he had witnessed the brutal murder of Julie Ward in a protected area. He claimed 3 men raped and killed Julie in the reserve. He described in detail that Julie was forced to drive his jeep a few miles away from Sander and the camp to park it in a ravine. He was then forced to put an SOS sign on the roof of the car, implying that something had happened and asking for help. The former intelligence officer admitted that he didn't have the courage to come forward and tell the truth because he was silenced. In 2018, John Ward asked authorities to obtain Jonathan Loewy's DNA to confirm whether he was the killer of his own daughter. However, nothing came of it. In 2019, Jonathan Roy passed away from pancreatic cancer. 2 months later, Ibrahim's father also died. John Ward persevered in his search for the culprit for 35 years. In total, he traveled to Kenya more than 200 times and spent more than £2 million. He meticulously gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, dug a toilet near the scene of the crime, and even stored DNA in his own refrigerator. In the shadow of uncertainty, his determination never changed. Didn't give up until the end. But unfortunately, John Ward passed away on June 7, 2023, and his wife passed away unexpectedly not long ago. This case teaches us that sometimes the truth is not easy to reveal. No matter how many years of investigation and hard work it takes, some mysteries may never be solved. Although his father, John Ward, spared no effort in his quest for the truth and for years did not find an answer. So, what do you think about this case? Who do you think is the murderer? Feel free to share your views and thoughts in the comments section. Falling leaves and flying flowers, listen to the story of one person and realize the way of human nature. We'll see you next time.